Tell the audience a little bit about what you do.
Well, I have been teaching sales now full-time since 1999. So I'm in my 25th year.
Wow.
And a typical day for me is doing several coaching calls and a Zoom or two, sometimes a speech, and it's focused on helping people increase their sales results.
That's awesome. So, whenever I think of sales, and I think a lot of people could agree, is they think about that iconic scene from The Wolf of Wall Street, where Leonardo DiCaprio is like, "Hey, sell me this pen." And so, have you seen that movie?
I have, yes.
Okay, cool. So, like, if you were in that guy's shoes, right, the guy, being told to sell the pen, like, how would you personally sell it?
That is a great question. I've never really thought about it, but what I will say, as far as adding value to our listeners, is that human beings do things for self-serving reasons. And at the end of the day, what people buy are benefits. And so one of the things that I teach is, prior to delivering your presentation, to identify what are those key benefits and to deliver a benefit-driven presentation. There's an emphasis on the close. People always want to know, Eric, how do I close more effectively? And it's not really about closing more effectively. It's about bringing the benefits to life in the body of the presentation and getting the prospect to want what you're offering before you get to the close. The close is the natural conclusion to a well-delivered presentation. So whether it's selling a pen or real estate, or, I sell coaching services, it really comes down to benefits. And how is the other person that you're selling to, how are they going to benefit from your product or service?
Yeah, that's so I was in college, I was actually running a sales team. I started off as a sales person selling paint jobs. And so, I would, go door to door and generate leads. And then I would go and call them, set up an estimate. I would go inside the home and do a presentation for Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, and then hire a team of painters, sell them into why they should work for this college student, And so one of the things I saw was, and I learned, is that, oftentimes people try to sell features, and like what the product or service does. Instead, they should be focusing on the benefits and how the other person can benefit. So I can totally agree with you there.
Yeah, and selling a paint job, it's the benefit of having a more beautiful room or a more beautiful exterior. And then if you were then getting painters to do the work, it's selling them on the compensation they're going to receive in exchange for the work that they're going to do. And so everything you just described is very much looking at it through the lens of the person that you're influencing, which is counterintuitive in the sense that our favorite thing to talk about tends to be ourselves, and influence is all about the other person.
Right.
And so it's about entering their world and viewing their experience from their perspective.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And I remember when I was like doing the sales and I started teaching other people and like growing the team, I noticed a lot of people were kind of like resistant to, sales and learning sales. I think I heard a talk of yours where you kind of talked about the same thing. People resist sales. So why is that? Why are people just naturally resisting sales? Sales kind of gets a bad rap.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And it is my experience that there's a stigma to sales in our culture. And so people have been taught to resist sales.
Right.
And if you really step back and just think about it logically, right? Selling is going to be true for just about any successful business. They're going to be effective at sales. And so, why is there this stigma to sales? And, I don't really know the answer to that, but what I do enjoy doing is helping people create a different idea about sales. And so if I look at sales as arm twisting, high pressure, manipulation, used car sales, those are simply ideas.
Right.
And what I teach is, instead of looking at sales like that, look at sales as selling equals service. And for a lot of people, they're like, selling equals service? Like, what? Like, I'd never heard anybody talk about sales like that. So my life is all about serving the person that's in front of me.
Mm.
So right now, you're in front of me on this Zoom interview, and I'm here to serve you. And in turn, I'm here to serve your audience.
Mm.
And then when our call's done, the interview's done, then I'll go on and I'll serve the next person. And it might be my kids,
Mm.
or it might be serving my wife, or it might be serving my pet right now had surgery yesterday. So she's got to get special drugs that she's taking and kind of be babied as to help her recover. And so I'll be serving my dog. And when I put on my sales hat, I'm still serving. I'm serving by explaining the benefits of my product or service so the other person can make an informed buying decision. So I just live my life so I serve the person that's in front of me in addition to what I'm selling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great perspective change there. And I think you're totally right. Once it comes to why is society so resistant to sales, is I think whenever people think of sales, they think about maybe a bad experience they had where the salesman was pushy, made them feel a little uncomfortable. It might have been at the car dealership, where like the car salesmen are highly incentivized to get the sale on the spot, and they know that once that person leaves, they're probably not going to come back. So and then they're also on commission, so and they need to feed their family. So maybe there's some, that sort of element, and why people feel a little resistant.
Well, there's also the media, how
Mm.
does the media portray salespeople? You mentioned the Wolf of Wall Street. Well, that gentleman was a crook.
Right.
So it's like, here's the salesperson in the media. He's a crook. And you look at how salespeople are portrayed in movies or even in cartoons. I remember watching, I forget the name of it, but my kids are older now, but when they were younger, there was this cartoon, and it was a bunch of tools and they were characters. And so there was a tool character in the cartoon who was this dishonest salesperson. It's like, you're programming my 5-year-old kid that selling is dishonest.
Right.
And that's just the way that society, media portrays salespeople. And so it creates a cultural hypnosis. Hypnosis is the non-critical acceptance of an idea. So people non-critically accept sales as arm twisting, high pressure manipulation. Then they need sales skills in their job. And no one ever has explained to them, not in every case, but in many cases, that selling can be service.
Right.
And so for some people, that simple idea is a breakthrough idea. And there's so many ideas like that in sales where you can have a shift in your thinking. For example, you prospected me to be a guest on your podcast. And so you had to have a certain way of thinking about that, because if you were afraid of rejection, you probably wouldn't have prospected me. And if my memory is right, you reached out a second time and I just hadn't responded to the first message. It wasn't like I was avoiding you. But you have to have a lot of confidence to reach out more than once. And that's an idea that you have about prospecting. They're like, hey, I have something of value that Eric's going to be interested in, or whatever your thought process was. And so a lot of people focus on the fear of the rejection. And that's the idea that they focus on, which causes them to not prospect. So you demonstrated something very powerful as far as your future. Your future is unlimited because you're willing to reach out and go for what you want in life. And I live my life in the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's so powerful, like sometimes people just get busy, they just miss it. And so I think sometimes people kind of get in their own heads and they think, oh, is it me that they don't want it to be, I could have been like that, like, hey, is it me? And that would have, made me afraid if I thought that way to reach out a second time. And so, yeah, I think oftentimes we kind of like get our own heads and and feel unconfident in ourselves,
That's it. And you make a great point. We're not, when we're prospecting in almost every case, we're not at the top of the prospect's priority list. Right. I'm reaching out to a company to be a guest speaker at their sales meeting. Right. And as valuable as that is, and as much as I believe in the value I'm creating for that company, probably not at the top of the sales manager's priority list for the day. And so when he or she doesn't respond to me, a lot of times it doesn't mean anything negative or they're not interested. They're just busy doing life. And so I had that same approach, and I reached out to somebody and got an appointment recently on the 11th time I reached out.
Wow.
So the first 10 didn't work. And, I have a mindset that it doesn't matter how many times I reach out. So I don't get discouraged after like 4 and go, oh, what's wrong with me? Or they're not interested. I just keep prospecting.
Right.
If I feel that the opportunity is a good opportunity, I will be relentless and I won't stop. So my mindset is I will continue to follow up until I get a yes or a no. Not for every opportunity, but if the opportunity is a significant one.
Right.
Most people don't have that mindset, but it's a very profitable mindset.
Absolutely. So how can people get over that? Like what mental adjustments do they need to make? Like, have you found useful, whenever you're teaching sales to people? Like, I'm sure you've tried different things. Hey, let's say it this way. And then, that doesn't really work, shifting your mindset. Let's try it this way. Like,
well,
what have you found to work?
I'll give you the breakthrough idea. And I got it from a coaching session. I hired a coach for 10 hours of his time. It was $45,000.
Wow. That's it, huh?
Okay.
That's a lot.
So what he taught me is the answer to your question, or one of them anyway, which is if you reverse engineer results, you've got results, and then what's upstream from results is action. And what's upstream from action is thought or language. And what's upstream from thought or language is being, as in state of being. So if I'm being fearful, if I'm being inconsistent, if I'm being lack of action, and then if that's my upstream, and then what's downstream from that is my thoughts, which are, I don't know what to say. I don't have enough leads. They probably won't be interested. Something's wrong with me. So if my being is inconsistent and my thought is laced with fear and doubt, that's going to create a certain action. So what's the solution? The solution is to change my being and change my thinking. So being, like when you reached out to me the second time, who are you being at that point? What was your state of being when you reached out to me the second time?
I was being, maybe Eric is, I guess that's more of a thought, but being more confident in what I have, like I know that confident. Eric would benefit from this.
You are being, I believe in my product and service. You are being commitment. You are being action. You are being, this is going to create value. And then from there, that creates a set of thoughts. Right. This is going to be valuable for Eric, even though he hasn't responded yet. I know he's going to want to say yes, or whatever your thought was. Right. So, I'll talk to somebody and their thought in a coaching session, they'll say, I hate doing prospecting calls. Well, that thought is going to haunt them. Because if it's like this, if I'm single and I want to, like when I'm married right now, and I was married before I got divorced, and then I got remarried. If in between my wives, if I was like, all the good women are taken, or I'm a single dad, who's going to want me? But that wasn't my thought. My thought was, I'm going to have my happily ever after, and I only need one. I don't need 5. I need 1. There's one out there. Of the billions of women on the planet, there's one out there. So that thought creates a certain action where somebody else thinks, well, I don't know what to say. I don't have enough leads. I'm probably going to get rejected. I don't like calls. Well, as long as somebody says it's a declaration, I don't like calls. That's a declaration. As long as they declare that, that is going to cost them so much action. And so the reality is this: a thought is just an idea. And ideas can be changed, and you're in control of the ideas in your mind, as I am. Right. So I had this situation one time where I was working with the $45,000 coach, and I had this beef with my dad. And so from that, my dad needs to apologize to me. my dad needs to accept responsibility. That was my idea. So my
Mhm.
idea was he needs to accept responsibility. And in my view, he wasn't. So we were stuck, or at least I
Mhm.
was stuck. So I'm saying this to the coach, and he goes, you have an idea that your dad needs to apologize. And he goes, your dad doesn't need to apologize. And I go, he doesn't? He goes, no, that's just an idea that you have. And
Mhm.
your dad doesn't have to be accountable either. I'm like, he doesn't? He goes, no. I said, so what should I do? He goes, just be loving towards your dad.
Mm.
So I reached out to my dad over text. I'm like, hey, do you want to go to Starbucks? And he accepted. And when we went to Starbucks, I took an interest in him and what he was up to and his life. And I was just loving towards him. And I let go of him needing to be responsible and needing to accept responsibility and needing to apologize. And it transformed the communication.
Mm.
So I had an idea. If my idea stayed, my dad needs to accept responsibility. And in my view of the world, he wasn't. So basically, he's older than me. He probably passes away before I, because he's older. I mean, I could
Mhm.
die first, but basically that story would go to one of our deaths.
Mhm.
But I shifted the idea. If
Right.
people get in a thought in their head that they think it's the truth. The truth
Mhm.
is I'm not good on the phone. That's not the truth.
Mhm.
That's an idea. It's like a
Right.
piece of clothing. I could change my shirt. You can change your thinking. Well,
Mhm.
it took me years to figure this out.
Right.
And now I can, I'll just give you one other example. I used to not be an investor.
Mm.
So I'd make money and I wouldn't invest. And if I ever did invest, then eventually I'd sell the asset and spend the money. So my net worth was just flat. Nothing was going, nothing up, right?
Mhm.
So I thought, if I keep this thought, I'm not an investor, what's my likely predictable financial future? And I'm like, I'm going to be broke when I get old.
Mhm. Right.
So I changed the idea. I said, instead of I'm not an investor, I just crossed out the word not. I am an investor.
Mhm.
So now I invest every month. And now my
Right.
net worth's going like this every month.
Mhm.
So now when I get to retirement, I'll be a multimillionaire just by removing the word not.
Right.
So
Hmm.
we create our reality with our language. And so if you just listen to somebody, if they saying, my wife and I are always arguing,
Mhm.
that's how they're creating their reality. My wife and I, we rarely argue. If we
Right.
did argue, there'd be like a red flag, like danger, danger, like make a shift, Eric.
Mhm.
But some people are very comfortable living in the idea that my wife and I always argue. And so it's amazing how our thinking is creating our reality.
Right. Absolutely. So, you talk about upstream. So being becomes before thinking. Should people change the thinking or should people change the being first? Like which one
It's
comes
it's
first?
really it's both. So here's
Mm.
what it is. If my thinking and my being is creating my results,
Mhm.
then I can observe my thoughts and I
Right.
can go, what is the thinking that's creating my results of not going to the gym? Like that's a common thing people don't do, right? Like I need to go
Mhm.
to the gym more. It's like, okay,
Right.
so you want to go to the gym more? Yes, but you're not going. Right. Okay. So what's the thinking that's creating that? And they might say, well, I'm too busy. Okay.
Mhm.
Or the thinking is, I know I need to go, but I never go. Or the thinking is, getting in shape doesn't matter. Right.
Mhm.
So observing what's creating a result you don't want is not really that valuable unless you followed up with, what does my thinking need to be in order to create what I want?
Mhm.
So what does my thinking need to be about the gym in order to create what I want? My thinking needs to be, I consistently go to the gym.
Mhm.
I say what I'm going to do, and I follow through and do what I say. I schedule gym time in. I prioritize my health.
Mhm.
And then you look at the being. What's my being that's creating me not going to the gym? I'm being inconsistent. I'm being unmotivated. What does my being need to be in order to get the fitness results that I want? I need to be motivated. I need to be consistent. I need to be massive action. I need to be follow through and do what I say. I need to be my commitment.
Mhm.
And what's fascinating is it's a choice.
Mm.
It's a choice. I'm a former cook at McDonald's, college dropout. I went to community college in Rockland, where I live now. You're supposed to go for 2 years. I went for 5. I never graduated. So I'm a college dropout, former cook at McDonald's, bottom producing salesperson. And I'm out doing some pretty amazing things in the world. And it's like, well, how could I do that? If my background, my resume in my early 20s was a terrible resume. It was weak. I had nothing going for me. So it's like, how could I go from that to what I'm doing today? And it has to do with changing my thinking, changing what I'm speaking, and realizing a big part of it was accepting my greatness and acknowledging it. And in our culture, it's kind of like it's frowned upon to be like, hey, I'm great.
Right.
But what if you are great? But what if everybody's great? What if everyone has unique gifts and talents? See, I used to walk around the world as I'm average and ordinary. So I created my life as average and ordinary, which got me to go to community college and got me to work at McDonald's and got me to be a bottom producing salesperson. And then one day, this is mostly through mentoring and coaching where I received it, I realized I'm extraordinary. Not as a statement of ego, but a statement of fact. Like Steph Curry is the best 3-point basketball shooter ever. That's not ego. If Steph goes, I'm the greatest shooter ever, it's not ego, it's fact. He put the work in. And so a lot of people are, in my experience, because I've done thousands of coaching calls, literally thousands of coaching calls. So I've gotten ahead of thousands of people, and they are operating from not a position of owning their greatness. They're operating from how I used to operate from, which was I'm average and ordinary. So I created my life as average and ordinary, and it doesn't have to be that way. It's having accurate thinking about your greatness. Accurate thinking is a distinction from Napoleon Hill. It's one of his success principles from Think and Grow Rich. So it's pretty fascinating when you really dive in and explore the mind and realize what we're capable of.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I feel like a lot of us, and maybe society in general, like we kind of feel, and maybe it's the school system, maybe the school system is like, hey, you'll be like everybody else, get a job like everybody else. And like, there's that programming there. And some people aren't even conscious of their thoughts. It's kind of like, it's like a replay in their minds over and over and over, and they're not even aware of their thoughts.
I think that's most people. And I think it's the way it is because a man can only teach you what he knows. Right. So my dad can only teach me what he knows. Now, my father is the Michael Jordan of pharmacy. Okay. My dad he taught at the university. He was the president of the board. He would be an expert witness in court cases. He mentored other pharmacists, but I never observed my dad acknowledging that he was the Michael Jordan of pharmacy. In other words, it's like, yeah, it's no big deal. Whatever, I'm doing what I'm doing. I don't think my dad ever saw himself as extraordinary, but I see him as that. Well, if my dad never saw himself as that, what's he going to teach me as his son? See, he's not going to teach me greatness if he doesn't see himself as that. So most of the parents walking around the earth are not seeing themselves as great. So they're not going to be putting that in their kids. It's like, how did I start learning this? I got around people like Les Brown, Tony Robbins, Dr. Moyne, one of my mentors, Jay Abraham. Some of these names are known. Some of them listeners may not know, but these are extraordinary human beings. Steve Hardison, the gentleman that I paid the 45 grand to coach me, they saw the greatness in me so I could see it. But if they hadn't seen it, I'd still be walking around planet Earth thinking I'm average and ordinary.
Right. Now, here's a follow-up thought to that. Do you think everybody can be great? Because if everybody's great, technically greatness is diluted, right? Like that's like the new average. What are your thoughts on that?
It's not, out of the 8 billion people on the planet, how many of them are walking around extremely confident? Not very many. So I think the world will blow itself up before we ever get to that point. But the reality is we all have natural gifts and talents, and the greatness is in just regular things. For example, when you reached out to me twice to book today's podcast, did you view reaching out to me the first and the second time, as extraordinary? Or did you view it as, it's no big deal, or some other way? How did you view your own actions of reaching out to me?
I just saw it as I got a job to do. I'm going to send this email, like I want him on here. I find Eric interesting. And if he says no, then all good. There's plenty of other people I can talk to, that
Okay.
are also great.
So here's the reality from my view.
Mhm.
What you did in reaching out to me, especially since you did it a second time, is extraordinary.
Mm.
It's actually very rare.
Mm.
It's very rare. And you have a very unique gifting in your willingness to reach out for what you want, knowing that a no or being ignored is probably a very realistic scenario.
Mhm.
Most people will not do that.
Right.
So that's a simple thing that is extraordinary.
Mhm.
Okay. There's a homeless man. He's no longer in my community, but I noticed him one day. So I bank
Mhm.
at Wells Fargo. The bank's nearby the gym that I work out. So I'm in this parking lot a lot. And I
Mhm.
see this car. I live in Rockland, California. We don't really have much homeless here.
Mhm.
And so it really stood out, this car. It just didn't belong in the parking lot.
Mhm.
And I kept seeing the car.
Right.
So one day I walked up to him. I said, "Hi, my name's Eric." He goes, "My name's Darren." And I took him under my wing and I did a bunch of things for him. And right now, I just got in the mail this check right here. So I reached out to this person that I reached out to before that will donate money to causes. Okay. So I reached out to this guy and he sent me a check. I don't know if you can see this, but it's for $1,000.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And this is in my name. This is for my homeless guy.
Right.
So although this money will go in my bank account, it will then go to him. I'm raising $3,000 for this homeless guy because when I met him, he was in a car and his car got repossessed. Long story. One of the many things I did for Darren, I walked him into the bank and helped him set up a bank account because he was afraid to go in there as a homeless person. It's kind of scary to walk into a bank and open a bank account. Okay. So now I reached out to him recently and he's like, "Yeah, I don't have my car anymore." So I'm raising $3,000 for him to go get him a car. So that will be his new home, which it seems like, well, that sucks. He's living in his car. What's better than him living outdoors?
Right. Exactly.
But here's the thing. Who walks up to a homeless guy and introduces themselves, walks him into the bank, raises money for them? Basically, I've identified that part of my purpose in life is to take this homeless man under my wing. Okay. Now, that's extraordinary. And it's not me patting myself on the back. It's what's so. So as people go out and do things like that, like here's a real simple one that a lot of people do. They will take care of their parents as their parents get older. Right. And they will caregive for their parents. And I don't know, if I'm being honest, if I would caregive for my parents. I have 4 brothers and sisters. I would probably be like, "Yo, it's on you." I probably just wouldn't do that. And I'm not saying that to criticize myself. I just don't know that I would do that. So put me to the side. It doesn't matter about what I would do. If somebody's caregiving for their parents, that's extraordinary. But let me ask you this. Do you think most people that caregive for their parents, do you think they view that as extraordinary?
Probably not. No.
They're just like, "Well, my parents took care of me. Now it's my turn to take care of them." And they blow it off like it's no big deal. But there's a lot of people like me that selfishly wouldn't do it. Now, there's other things that I do, fortunately, that make me not a bad guy, right? Like raising money for this homeless guy. I have just like many kids, a complex relationship with my parents. It is what it is. But when people, put their lives on hold, or at least a portion of it, they caregive for their parents, that's extraordinary. And in my experience, most people, when they do extraordinary things like that, they just blow it off like it's no big deal. And it's miraculous. Right. And when you own it as miraculous, it's a confidence builder. I was talking to a client the other day and, in a coaching call, people are sharing their thoughts, and that's the whole point. Have me help them. And people get honest about what's going on in some cases, not in every case. And he goes, "I think I'm a loser." So he's walking around planet Earth. He's a business owner. his idea about himself is he's a loser. He's not a loser. He's an extraordinary human being.
Mm-hmm.
But if he has an idea about himself that he's a loser, how is he going to show up in the world?
Right.
He's going to show up like that. So when we have the confidence and we can accept our greatness and acknowledge our greatness when we're doing extraordinary things, I think people tend to focus on where they're falling short.
Mm-hmm.
On any given day, I fall short 1 to 5 times a day.
Right.
But I'm doing 15 to 20 great things a day, like being on your show to add value to you and serve your audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing that 15 to 20 times a day. I can focus on that, or I can focus on the 1 to 5 times that I'm falling short, and I'm right either way.
Right.
So,
wow, that is powerful. The way that you think, the way that you be really changes your life, and how you view the world, and then also affects the actions that you take. I think that's such a powerful thing that a lot of people need to hear. And so I know that earlier you mentioned a few people that you learned from, your mentors. And with social media, it feels like there's so many different people out there, especially in sales, like sales gurus. I'm sure you heard of Grant Cardone, Brian Tracy, Jim Rohn. And so for someone that's, wanting to learn more about sales, how do they know which philosophy is the best philosophy? Like how do they decide that with so many different gurus out there?
yeah. Well, the 3 people that you mentioned, I've extensively studied all 3 of them. And they're all on my phone on Audible.
Oh, awesome.
Grant Cardone and Brian Tracy. I've studied probably, I never added it up, but probably 100 different people through their books, podcasts, YouTube videos, coaching programs, seminars, etc. I planted my flag with a few of them. So if I was going to advise somebody, I would tell somebody, learn from lots of different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
But I would also say, don't shop mentors. And so what I mean by that is kind of like in a marriage, I'm on my 2nd marriage. I've been married to my 2nd wife for 7 years. I've planted my flag. Like this is for my happily ever after. I'm going to be with my wife. I'm not, I don't have thoughts about, well, do I want to be with my wife or not? So on the mentor side, I've been with Dr. Moyne, who's my coach and mentor, since 1994.
Wow.
And I made a decision that I was going to stay with him for as long as he would allow me to. And we actually do a podcast together. We have a weekly podcast that we do. We do different business things together. He still coaches me to this day. I planted my flag with Dr. Moyne, Jay Abraham on the marketing side, Tony Robbins on the personal development side, Steve Hardison on the personal development side. And then there's other people like Grant Cardone, Brian Tracy, Jim Rohn, who I've studied, but I wouldn't say I planted my flag with those individuals. So if you can find a couple of key people that you really resonate with and go deep with them, like I can get somebody to a black belt in influence, but to get them there, from a being standpoint, they would have to show up in my relationship with them and be the ultimate student. So in a coaching relationship, I can't do somebody's sit-ups for them.
Right.
They got to do their work. And if somebody has that level of commitment, they want to get to black belt level, I have the skill set to teach them how to do that. It would just be a shame if somebody want to get to that level and they're like, going to all these different people. Find somebody or a couple people that you can plant your flag with, and then learn from all kinds of different perspectives. At least that's what I've done, and it's really served me.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Is try to see what's out there, and then you'll start to figure out what kind of what you vibe with. And so if you vibe with them, then you can decide to set that flag and double down on that content and learn from them. So that's great. Yeah. Okay. So that being said, what are some of the things that, you mentioned a couple of people, like what are the most profound things that you've learned from them besides, the mindset and that you just talked about?
Well, with Dr. Moyne, he is, from my view, the top script writing expert in the world.
Mm.
And when it comes to sales, we're often delivering a repetitive presentation. So
Mhm.
the real estate agent is going to do a listing presentation. The car salesperson is going to do the car presentation. The network marketer is going to do the business opportunity presentation. The health
Mm.
coach is going to do the health coaching conversation. And so as a best practice, you would create an outline for that repetitive presentation. And then each outline point is its own mini script. And the mini script is the talk track.
Mhm.
And a lot of people resist sales scripting
Mhm.
because their idea about it is it's just not me. That's rehearsed. It's inauthentic.
Mhm.
And, we don't really have time today to do a deep dive on scripting, but the bottom line is this: sales scripting is the most profitable sales technique that I've ever learned.
Mm.
And you absolutely can be yourself and you can be authentic. You don't need to be canned or rehearsed. It really has to do with the preparation of the presentation. So
Mhm.
that idea about scripting is, probably the most significant thing that I learned from Dr. Moyne.
Mhm.
Tony Robbins is probably measuring effort daily.
Mm.
So the way I think about my effort level is I play at a 7, 8, 9, or a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10 every day. So a bad day for me means I'm playing at a 7.
Mm.
Well, most people don't think about, well, what's my effort level today? And if you're not mindful of it, a bad day might be a 2.
Mm.
So somebody
Mhm.
might be not thinking in terms like the way I think about effort level daily, 7, 8, 9, 10 every day, bar none, no questions asked. Someone else doesn't have that idea in their head and they're playing at a 2 to a 5.
Right.
Well, I watched Tony Robbins. I watched his effort level on a daily basis. And I learned not so much from what he told me, but more of just observing his actions.
Mm.
Steve Hardison, he's the person who taught me all about how we create our reality with language. And he taught me about being and that I could shift my being and I could shift my language. And that was very transformational. Jay Abraham taught me all about marketing. And one of the things that Jay taught me was it's a concept called social currency.
Mm.
So social
Mhm.
currency means I do something nice for somebody. They don't owe me. Like right now, I'm here to serve you. Yeah, I'm here to serve your audience, but really I'm here to serve you. I'm
Mhm.
here not for your audience. No offense, audience, but you
Mhm.
invited me to be here and I wanted to acknowledge your request. And so that's why I'm here. And then the listeners can benefit. And if any of them, want to connect with me, that's cool too. And maybe it grows my business a little bit. But I really didn't honestly come here to grow my business. I came in here to acknowledge your request.
Mm.
So in doing that, that creates social currency. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean that you owe me, but it's kind of like this. If I come help you move, you're moving your house, you got to box it up, load the
Mhm.
boxes, load the bed, and I actually come over, I'm at your house for 4 hours helping you
Mhm.
load up. And I need a favor in 6 months. And I ask you, it doesn't mean you're going to do it. And it doesn't mean you owe me,
Mhm.
but you're more likely to do it
Right.
based on social currency.
Exactly.
So I'm a social currency millionaire.
Mhm.
So I just go out in the world and I'm just serving all the time.
Mhm.
And I'm not expecting anything in return,
Right.
right? Like this homeless guy that I'm get this car for. It's not like, okay, bro, you owe me.
Mhm.
Like I'm just
Right.
giving to give,
Yeah.
and so is the guy that sent me the check. Right. So,
Mhm.
but in doing that, I have so much good favor in the world that it's kind of like the universe just hooks me up.
Right.
I
Yeah.
gave a speech today and I was talking to a board of realtors and there was, I don't know, 60 people in the audience and I didn't charge for my speech. And yeah, I was there to grow my business, but
Mhm.
I poured into these people.
Right.
And so a lot of social currency, I probably created $6,000 in social currency.
Mm.
Now it's another $6,000 added to my social currency bank account. I learned that from Jay Abraham.
Ah, I see.
I asked Jay to speak at one of my events and I said, hey, Jay, I need you for an hour. My budget's $5,000.
Mhm.
And he's a professional speaker. So this is what he does for a living. And he goes, just so you know, my speaker fee is $50,000. And he goes, you know what, Eric, keep your $5,000 and I'll come and speak at your event.
Mm,
So Jay came and spoke at my event. Now, a lot of times in the speaker world, you speak for free because you can sell your program.
right.
He didn't sell. You speak for free so you can generate leads at the event. He didn't lead gen.
Mm,
He just showed up and served me in the audience.
right.
Now, when's the last time you offered somebody $5,000 to do their profession? And they're like, yeah, just keep your money. I'll just do it for you. Nobody does that.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he's Jay Abraham, because when he needs something, anything he asks me, the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
But here's what's fascinating. There's 1,000 people in the world like me that would do anything Jay asks.
Right.
Because of that. So he's like a social currency billionaire.
Yeah.
So I learned that from Jay. So those are a couple of the insights.
Wow, that's a great way to think about it. I never thought of it that way. Like there's a bank account for currency. I mean, you hear about goodwill, you hear about karma, right? You do good, good will come back to you. But like describing it like a bank account really puts things in perspective, you know, where you kind of, whenever you want to take a deposit, you can, you know, if you have stacked up on those points or that currency.
Exactly. Yeah. I have so much goodwill built up with so many people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was a woman the other day who she's a real estate agent and she had a brain bleed and she couldn't work. And so you're a commissioned salesperson, your income dries up.
Jeez.
And I know how to raise money for stuff. And so I taught her all about the GoFundMe accounts. And I said, hey, I'll help you. And bottom line is we got her about $5,000. And so I was using my gifts and talents about fundraising and, you know, group crowdfunding and stuff. And so, you know, I'm not asking her for a cut and I'm not asking her for anything in return. I was just serving a fellow salesperson who had a brain bleed. So there's these times when we can do things for people where we have the ability to really help them. The question is, do we look the other way or do we help? Right. And I can't help everybody because I got to live my life. But there are times when a situation will present itself and I'll use my gifts and talents and I'll make a difference for somebody. But we all can do that.
Yeah, definitely.
We all have the ways that we can help people.
Absolutely. So, you know, you mentioned the first thing you've learned from your mentor was scripting. That's the most profitable thing you've ever learned in sales. So why is it the most profitable?
Because it increases close ratio. So if you look at it and go, how do I take my close ratio from 25% to 40 or 25 to 28 or 25 to 32? The most powerful way I know how to do it is to improve the quality of your presentation. And so it's kind of like a comedian who has a great routine and you drop them in any city and they get everybody standing ovation. They love that comedian. Well, it's the jokes. Well, the jokes are scripts.
Yeah.
And human beings respond in predictable ways. So there's things that we can do. For example, if I was a real estate agent, I might say to you, you know, it's very common that people will do a refinance on their house because houses tend to go up in value. And as the house goes up in value, like right now, my house has about 250,000 in equity in it. So I could go do a refinance and I could probably go access, say, 80 grand cash. So the loan officer comes to me and says, hey, you know, I'll help you get this cash out. Well, the problem is now I just pulled my equity out and it's unlikely I'm ever going to own my home free and clear.
Right.
But here's my mindset. I make my mortgage every month. I never am going to do a refi and I pay a little bit of extra to the principal and there will be a day that I own my home free and clear. Well, I don't think most people think like that. So if I was a real estate agent, I would say, look, I want to help you buy a house and I'm going to show you how to own your home free and clear. And then you can, you know, pass it on to your kids or whatever you want to do with it. And that would be a part of my scripting. And I would use storytelling, which is one of the most powerful forms of a script. If somebody was not a homeowner, maybe they're renting, and I would tell them stories of other renters who I've helped become homeowners, and how I
Right.
can do the same thing for them. And so all of a sudden they go from renter to, hey, I want to become a homeowner, to, Eric, with your help, I believe I can become a homeowner. And
Right.
now I close that sale, I make a $15,000 commission. It was the scripting.
Hmm.
The renter didn't come to me and say, I want to buy a house. I influenced the renter to want to buy a house
Yeah.
through my language. So it's like magic, but it's not magic. It's just harnessing the power of scripting. And you can bring the benefits to life in a presentation. You can overcome objections. You can create an irresistible offer. I mean, there's so many things that you can do to increase the persuasiveness of your presentation. And I studied it for years from Dr. Boyne,
Right.
and got really, really good at it. And so that's why I'm so excited about that idea.
Yeah, that's one thing I learned, when I was in college too, was, I had a script whenever I went in. It's like a 2 hour long script because it was a 2 hour presentation.
Mhm.
And so it was like, from when you go in, you build rapport, build a relationship with them, to like identifying the need. You go outside, you point at different areas of their house, which areas need to be worked on, you identifying that need, share the benefits, build urgency, all that stuff. And so there's an art to it, but also a science once you are able to, have a formula that works, and figure out how you can, build it around that service or that product.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And once you have the script down, you have it down.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
doesn't mean you can't be flexible.
Hmm.
Doesn't mean you can't modify the script during the presentation, where
Hmm.
it's going in with a plan, and you're going to outsell winging it. Because think of winging it like a comedian doing improv.
Right.
Jim Carrey, who's one of the funniest people ever, he was doing impressions using scripts, getting
Hmm.
standing ovations every time. He then was challenging himself to become a better comedian. So he started doing improv. He said half the time he'd get booed off the stage. So he went from standing ovations to booed off the stage. Well, he was doing improv.
Right.
And he was trying different things. And so he didn't know if it was going to be funny or not.
Hmm.
Whereas the impressions, he knew everybody was going to love it. But he realized impressions was not going to get him to be a leading man in Hollywood, which is what his dream was. And then ultimately he became a leading man in Hollywood. He invented his own style of comedy. And he did it he made some really significant decisions in his life based on vision of what he wanted to create in the future. But the main point I want to make here is scripts versus winging it. A script is going to outperform winging it. You could be occasionally brilliant winging it, but you're not going to be consistently brilliant. It's not going to happen.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree with you. So now let's say, a lot of the people that are listening are, either business owners or they're early in their professional career. Let's say someone wants to get started with sales, like what advice would you give them? Like, what are maybe 3 things that they can do? We got the first thing, which is like, changing your mindset and, not being so resistant to sales and having a different outlook on sales and being the type of person, and thinking about your thoughts. What are maybe some other things that people can do when they're getting started?
Well, one of the best things that you can do is apply best practices. And in any industry, there's going to be a set of best practices. And so it's going to successful people in the industry like real estate, auto sales, insurance, and finding out from them, how do you generate leads? Set appointments? How do you plan your day? What's your mindset? Like if I was a real estate agent, my mindset would be, I'm your real estate solution for life. The real estate agent that helped me on the home that I'm in now, it's been a few years since I closed this transaction. I haven't heard from him once. So he's transactional. It's not bad. It's just, that's who he is. He's a transactional guy. He's looking to close the next deal. He's not thinking about building a relationship to secure my future referral business. And the next time I need a realtor, like I wouldn't use him.
Right.
Even though he did a nice job for me, I wouldn't use him because he's not thinking about relationship. So if I was a real estate agent, that would be an important thing to know.
Mm-hmm.
Is let me build relationships. So when the person needs a realtor, they think of me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, these are the kinds of things that you can learn when you study best practices.
Right.
Best practices for closing, overcoming objections. You know, in the car business, they have what's called ups. And an up means somebody walks onto the dealership and then they take turns. The salespeople take turns with, okay, it's my turn. Now I get the up. Now I go back of the line. You know, 4 people come, then I get the 5th one. And we're rotating like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the number one car salesman in the world when he was alive was Joe Girard.
Mm.
And he didn't take ups. It's like, everyone around here is taking ups. The number one guy in the world didn't take ups.
Mm.
Why didn't he take ups? Because he was running he had preset appointments.
Mm.
So you would come to the dealership and instead of saying, I want to talk to somebody about buying a car, you would say, yeah, I'm here. I have an appointment with Joe Girard at 3:00 today.
Mm.
Well, I'll let Joe know you're here.
Right.
So all day long, he's running preset appointments. So if I'm selling cars, I can do what the industry does and do ups, or I can do what the number one guy in the industry. It's probably a combination of both. You probably do some ups and some preset appointments, but most car guys are not thinking about preset appointments.
Yeah.
Well, that's all documented in a book called How to Sell Anything to Anybody by Joe Girard. He wrote a book about it. Most car guys, they don't even know who Joe Girard is, and they don't know that that book exists.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to find what is that book in your industry?
Right.
Who are the top people in your industry? Like in my industry, the coaching industry, this is true for many industries, is the hub of my business is my CRM.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a lot of coaches that don't even have a CRM.
Right.
So if they were asking me, well, Eric, how do you do it? I go, well, I got my CRM. Well, how do you get the emails?
Mm-hmm.
And I go out and I do speeches. Oh, okay. Well, how do you do the speeches?
Mm-hmm.
Here's how you do the speeches. Oh, okay. And then they start modeling that, and then they start producing a great result.
Right.
But most people aren't thinking like that. They're not looking at best practices. They might not even be aware of a thing called best practices.
Right.
So best practices, and the other third tip I would say is to have a vision for your business. How long do you plan on being in the industry? So I was talking to a loan officer yesterday. I asked her, how long do you plan on being in the industry? She said 6 or 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay, so let's be thinking about creating the best results possible for you for the next 6 to 7 years. Mm-hmm. What does that look like versus thinking about the next 30 days?
Right.
It's different ways of thinking.
Yeah.
One's the long game, one's the short game, and they're both valid.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people, they don't even have a distinction of a long game. They're not thinking like that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's powerful. And the strategies that you would do for, let's say 30 days would be a lot different than planning for 6 or 7 years, or even 30 years. The approach is going to be different.
Yeah. Like I met with the CEO of the Hunger Project, which is one of the world's leading organizations in eradicating hunger globally, which is one of my passions. And so I met with him, and it's really, I want to have a relationship with him for the next several decades. And I'm not looking really for anything from him, probably even the rest of this year. It's more of a down the road as I get more established in making my contribution to eradicating hunger and having that relationship. So I met with him the other day in San Francisco. I drove 2 hours one way for a lunch meeting. For something that is a relationship that's going to help me 10 years from now.
Right.
So first of all, who's driving 2 hours one way for a lunch meeting? I'll just do Zoom. He offered Zoom. He goes, hey, we could do Zoom. I go, no, I want to meet you. Because I want the relationship.
Right.
But I don't need the relationship really now. In 10 years, as my nonprofit to eradicate hunger globally, and I go raise $1 billion, and I'm looking for places to put that money. And I reach out to him and say, hey, I've got a significant amount of money. And what are some projects that you need money for? I'll already have the relationship.
Right.
But most people don't think like that.
No.
They're just focused on the next thing, and they're looking for efficiency, and efficiency is fine, but it's different. Like, what did I communicate to him? When I drove 2 hours to meet with him, I communicated commitment. I communicated I'm serious. I communicated you matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have to say I'm committed.
Mm-mm.
He knew I was committed by the fact that he's like, Zoomer drive to San Francisco and we'll meet. I'm like, I'll drive to San Francisco. I had to go down the night before. The way my day worked, I didn't have a 2-hour gap in my day. So I went down the night before, spent $100 in the hotel. The parking was $55. The hotel was $100. So I could do my calls in San Francisco to then meet with him. And, all that was done as a way of letting him know you matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
I got that appointment by cold prospecting him on LinkedIn.
Wow.
So like you reaching out to me a couple times, I reached out to him on LinkedIn. Never heard of me.
Right.
I don't mean anything to him as far as me being a sales trainer doesn't mean anything to the CEO of one of the major nonprofits on the planet. Like, okay, Eric, you're a sales trainer. What do you do? What do I care?
Right.
So I didn't have any credibility with him, the fact that I was a sales trainer. But I cold prospected him and we got the phone call, and then the phone call turned into the lunch meeting, and now I have a relationship. I got his cell phone. I can text him right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, these are the things, finding the successful people in your industry and talking to them about how they're doing it, and you can learn from them, and it can really make a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so powerful. And, I was talking to Adrian Boycell. He was on a few podcasts ago. And what he shared was, like a lot of people are looking for the shortcuts. And generally speaking, there's no shortcuts. But, mentorship and learning from people who have made the mistakes before is a form of a shortcut, because you are able to just kind of avoid the mistakes that they made. And instead of learning it on your own, you can learn from others, and that's where wisdom comes in. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah. Leveraging other people's wisdom. You put it, both of you put it really well there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. It's not a shortcut, but it is a more efficient way. And even within that, there still can be lessons that need to be learned.
Right.
But it is valuable. Like the hub of my business is my CRM. Somebody could be in business for 10 years and they don't even have a CRM.
Right.
It doesn't mean they're wrong for not having one, but you look at like when the pandemic hit, if I'm a restaurant and I have my customers on text, where I can send out those marketing texts, that gives me a huge advantage.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, is your restaurant even open when the pandemic hit and like, we don't even know if we're open or not. And so that's a form of a CRM. It's a database, a text database, an email database, a social media following. Those are all forms of ways of communicating with your base of people. And so, that's an insight that I had to be taught, because this guy told me I needed an email list in 2002. And I'm like, yeah, I don't need that. He's like, no, actually, Eric, you do. And he persuaded me. And so I'm like, okay, fine, I'll do it. And thank God I did, because that was a several $1 million decision.
Right.
I didn't know it was going to create millions of dollars in the future, but it did. And he influenced me, because I didn't have an email list at that point. I'd been in business for 4 years. I didn't have a database.
Wow. That's awesome. I love those 3 tips, changing your mindset, being in the way that you are, and then learning from others, best practices, and then also being able to have a vision for yourself, and deciding, what your plan and your goal is going to be. So well said. Thank you so much, Eric, for being on. I really appreciate this. I'm sure the audience really enjoyed it as well. Where can people find you?
I am the only Eric Lofholm on planet Earth. So if you Google Eric Lofholm, you're going to find me. And if you're a LinkedIn person, connect with me there. If you're Facebook, if you're YouTube, if you're Instagram, saleschampion.com is my website. If you want to stay in touch with me, opt in for my email list. I'm doing Zooms all the time, all kinds of fun stuff on how we can connect. So just find me online, and if you want to connect further, and we can go from there.